to ask a question. Sorry, yeah, the recording is live, and this session is live and also is live on all various social media platforms. So I hope that you'll use them as and when you can, and also encourage people to see it. Back to the housekeeping points. Raise your virtual hand to ask a question or to comment. Keep it short and to the point. Use chat to share your comments and questions and your contact details. Don't worry if your question or comment is not taken, but write it in the chat and it'll be acted upon. Finished with the housekeeping points. I'm deeply honored to welcome you to the second annual Sickle Cell and Blood Donation Awareness online talk show, hosted by the Sickle Cell Awareness Network. Today's gathering brings together patients, advocates, clinicians, community leaders, and national support organizations for one clear purpose: to inform and raise awareness about sickle cell anemia, its management, and the lived experiences of patients and families. To call for urgent action, encouraging blood donations, particularly from African, Caribbean, and Asian heritage communities, where the need is greatest and often most unmet. To identify clear gaps in service and support for patients, their carers, and families, and to commit ourselves to bridging those gaps together. Let us not forget, sickle cell disease is one of the most common genetic conditions in England, affecting 12,500 to 15,000 people today. Every year, hundreds of babies are born with this condition, and while it disproportionately affects people of African, Caribbean, Middle Eastern, and Indian descent, or I would say Asian descent, this is a global challenge demanding a global response. In Africa, 1 in 100 babies may be born with sickle cell disease. In India, it is 1 in 1,000. Here in England, 1 in every 2,000 live births is affected. This is not just a statistic, it is a call to action. Blood donations, medical innovations, community education, and policy change can transform lives. Together, we can ensure that sickle cell anemia and thalassemia is no longer a silent crisis, but a condition met with compassion, equity, and hope. With that spirit, let us begin this important conversation with our first distinguished speaker. Our first speaker hardly needs introduction, Pastor Dr. Andrew Buchanan. He is the executive founder of SCAN, the Sickle Cell Awareness Network, a leader of faith and action. Pastor Dr. Andrew Buchanan launched SCAN to shine a light on a condition too often neglected. He will open our meeting by sharing the reasons for starting SCAN, the vision behind the second annual gathering, and the aspirations for the future. Please join me in welcoming Pastor Dr. Andrew Buchanan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joshi, and everyone present today. You are once again very, very welcome. Some faces are very new, others we are used to each other. John James, thank you for coming back again. It's an honor, and everyone else. For time reasons, I won't go into that because our moderator will duly welcome everyone as we carry on. Sickle Cell Awareness Network was founded by myself, and the reasons to that was mainly I'm in church and I'm a church leader, but we got to a point to start understanding that when people come to church, beyond finishing a church service, life has to go on. And when church is finished and everyone goes back to their home, we started identifying what are some of the reasons that could be some families are suffering from or going through the challenges. So I got to understand about sickle cell, and it's quite prevalent in people of my demographic. So I picked up so much passion, and we started the Sickle Cell Awareness Network. We are not experts to this, but we do gather people like yourselves, Dr. Claire, John James, Dr. Manoji, Macrina, and everyone else, to come in and share your experience and raise awareness, because some things affect us because we do not know. The more we know, the better we become. Then we can navigate and find better ways to manage life. And I also came across the fact that all that they need sometimes is just blood donation. As I speak to you now, I've donated blood 4 times, and one of the most heartfelt text messages I ever have on my phone is a text message that comes from NHS to say, your blood donation has been used. So far, it's gone to 4 hospitals: St. Thomas in London, Warwickshire, and Birmingham, forgotten the 4th. That's a very, very heartwarming message to see. A blood donation, my blood donation has gone out to someone. So I'm very passionate about 2 things: raising awareness about sickle cell, like we are doing now, and also calling upon people to come and donate blood. So allow me to put this to bed now and let other people speak, because most of it is going to be said. But that's about us, that's about me, that's why we are here. Thank you so much, and God bless you all.
Pastor Dr. Andrew Bukenya, that was very, very clear. And you do what you do, which is very welcome. Thank you very much indeed. Time now is coming up to 12:40, and we are ready for our next speaker, Councillor Nigat Basharat. Our next speaker is a dynamic community leader, passionate advocate for diversity and inclusion, and a tireless worker for families across Sheffield. She's a councillor representing Netheredge and Sharrow, a mental health recovery worker, and serves on the Sheffield Health and Social Care Foundation Trust. Today, she will reflect on her community's challenges, her role in public service, and the importance of giving sickle cell disease the political and social attention it deserves. Let us warmly welcome Councillor Nigat Basharat. Over to you, Councillor Nigat.
Hi, everyone. And first of all, I'll take this opportunity to thank all the hosts and for actually inviting me here for such an important, obviously, topic, sickle cell and the blood transfusion awareness, the blood donation. So I just want to share a little bit my background, like you mentioned, with sickle cell and thalassemia. So I've been working in that field for about over 15, 20 years, supporting families affected by sickle cell and thalassemia. And also, unfortunately, after in 2013-14, our project closed down, so we were all made redundant. Knowing many people from who will probably be joining, and obviously the host, that this area of health, sickle cell and thalassemia, still there is a very lack of awareness amongst the community, even more so in Sheffield. So it's very much needed more awareness, even more awareness around the the donation as well. So moving forward, because of when you're in this field of work, and especially when you see young people going through the crisis in sickle cell or thalassemia when they're having their blood transfusions and chelation therapy, I did connect and I've got developed a passion in this field of work, especially working with communities. So after redundancy, me and my colleague, we carried on supporting the service user because they were left with no service in the community. And from there, without any plans, I ended up launching a small group called Thalassemia South Yorkshire. and that's been going like 8 years now, with limited resources and whatever people guided me at the time. And yeah, I found a lot of struggle. And then 8 years on, we carried on supporting families as we did in my paid role, but this was all voluntary. But I realized for supporting people, I needed a job. So I started looking for a job, and it took me some time because I'm a person who likes a job that I'm passionate from the heart. And I ended up having a role in Sheffield Health and Social Care as a mental health recovery worker. So both areas I'm very, very passionate about. And obviously health and community is something that I've developed and created a really compassion towards. So little did I know I will one day become a counsellor. Again, the journey, the community development work over those years led to me people asking me to stand as a counsellor. And I'll be honest, I didn't know what I was putting myself into. I never knew what was involved. But again, as things move forward, I'm 3 years in as a counsellor in Netherhead and Sharrow Ward, and I'm absolutely enjoying it, and I love every part of it because it's about making that difference in people's lives. So just to not talk too much on those, but when I was approached for this awareness, I can't express how much heartwarming it felt that somebody else has also picked up this, which we need more people to raise awareness around sickle cell and thalassemia. And I'm really blessed and honored to be actually here today, and also I will be engaging further with this group to be able to see what more we can do. And also within, like as you mentioned, as a counsellor, I still aim to actually raise awareness on these health issues, which I do believe and feel that it still needs more attention, so that what the impact is on the community and on these individuals who actually day in, day out live with the condition. And I won't go into the details. There are experts here who will be talking about it, but I just wanted to say from my side of this area is something that I'm very passionate about for a long time. And through my small project that I run, it is a voluntary organization, and with a limited people, where we actually support families affected by thalassemia. And thalassemia, again, is a genetic blood disorder and requiring obviously long-term treatment, and such as blood transfusions for life, and also chelation therapy as well. So inherited exactly the same way as sickle cell, but whereas with thalassemia, when they're about 3-6 months age, they get to know what their treatment is, blood transfusion and chelation therapy, whereas with sickle cell, obviously the crisis and the experiences are unpredictable, and obviously people are informed. And I think I just want to welcome and thank every person who actually pulled together in those years when no one knew what sickle cell was. A group of people, families who were affected, came together and actually started creating awareness. And this is where we've got, where we are today. And I just want to thank each one of them as well. So open to any questions, but I think I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nigat, for that very clear explanation of your role and responsibilities and the impact you are having on the communities that you serve. Are there any questions, Paul? Has anybody raised their hands? If they haven't, could I just ask Councillor Nigat, funding is always a perpetual issue, and it's a never-ending issue. So what I am thinking and what I'm asking you is, we have already established structures of community engagement. Why don't we use those structures to inform and advise and support um, people who are in this category? Because that doesn't cost money, it just means allocation of time and resource, a little bit of adjustment, and that will certainly bring the issue into the forefront and also reach the grassroots. So my question is, why don't we use existing resources and divert them rather than ask about more funding? Because that's the thing that politicians don't like to hear, more funding.
I feel just talking from the experience, and I'm sure there's other people who would probably want to chip in, but I mean, before we started off with no funding, but there are small pots of funding which you can apply for to do and serve those people who are affected. But to run an organization or a project, you do need long-term funding and to sustain. And I think this is what happened from my experience at the time where I was employed was Sickle Cell and Thalassemia Foundation, SCAP Foundation on the Wicker, doing fantastic work. And obviously that's after such a long time, never thought that that project would ever closed down because of the only project in Sheffield, specialized project in Sheffield, supporting families affected with sickle cell and thalassemia. But unfortunately, when I stepped into community role, I realized there was a circle going around, like very good projects doing excellent work, closing down because they couldn't actually sustain. And then because the need has always been there, then another group of people would actually, set up something. So that's something I experienced over my time engaging in the community, which is why I felt strongly that, when I stepped into the role as a counsellor, is that those grassroots community organizations, whether it's sickle cell and thalassemia and others as well, because they're doing fantastic work, and council needs to engage more in partnership with grassroots organization, so aim to help sustain, because one without the other cannot obviously carry on their own to be able to support. So community organizations need funding, and council, like to help serve, and the communities needs the community and the grassroots, community organizations. So I think what I've been pushing for and working with, and which I'm seeing it developing, is council working more strongly. I can speak for only Sheffield, obviously, aiming to work more in partnership with grassroots organizations. And this is where I work with the community organizations, find out where their struggles are, what more we can do, and build those stronger relationships. But you're right. When you've got that passion and drive, and you see struggle on the ground, I can give you, like, during COVID, nobody, none of us waited for funding or council or whatever. People pulled together, and we used our assets and resources and passion and compassion, and we got through it. And this is what I'm seeing, that we've got fantastic people in the community wanting to actually help, but sometimes to do more, we definitely need the funding, and working in partnership and working together is key, and sharing our expertise.
Thank you very much, Councillor Nigat, for that response to my question. Are there any more hands up for questions, Paul? I can't see any. No. Well, Councillor Nigat, thank you very much for your presence today and giving your perspective, which has been very helpful indeed from a community leader perspective and from the politics point of view as well. It is very welcome, and thank you very much. And we hope that you will continue to promote and promulgate our cause of sickle cell anemia and thalassemia, because it is like a forgotten or silent condition that people are not aware of. Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your work as well. Keep up the good work.
Thank you. So moving on to our third speaker is Mrs. Macrina Mbabazi. She brings both professional insight and lived experience. Born with sickle cell anemia, she has transformed her personal journey into a mission of hope. A UK-based psychotherapist, originally from Uganda, which is my country of birth, and I'm a proud Ugandan, very, very proud indeed. She integrates faith and therapy in her practice, while openly sharing her story to inspire others. Today, she will speak on living with sickle cell, its impact on children, marriage, work, and everyday life, and why we must increase blood donations from African and Asian heritage communities. Please join me in welcoming Mrs. Macrina Mbabazi. Over to you, madam.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
All right. Thank you very much. This is such an opportunity for me to be part of this. It is something that I really thank God for, to be a part of this. I thank Pastor Andrew for being always so proactive in pushing for blood donation and everything that he's doing. So my role today is really simple. It's simple, but it's really complicated as well. I could write several books about this subject, so I'm going to try and condense it in 10 minutes. So how does sickle cell affect me, Macrina, on a daily basis? First of all, sickle cell is like almost on a spectrum. We all don't get affected the same. There's some people who don't have pain regularly, then there's some people who have pain regularly, there's some people who are in hospital every other day, then there's some people who have not been in hospital. So all of us are affected so differently. So I'm going to talk about how it affects me. Like the speaker said, that the moderator said, I'm Macrina Mbabazi. I was born with sickle cell. I was diagnosed at 5 years old, and my parents were told that I would not survive beyond 5. But thank God that I'm here now, and I'm here to share my story. Last time I was here, I gave hope to everyone with sickle cell, or everyone who has kids with sickle cell. But today I'm going to try and endeavor to tell you the real nitty-gritty of how everyday life is. So personally, I've had a stroke. I had a stroke when I think I was 19, 18, and it left me in coma for 3 months. And as a result, I have blood transfusions, exchange transfusions every 6 weeks. So they take out 7 units, put in 7 units, depending on how my blood has broken down. So that's one of the challenges that I depend on the blood transfusion. I depend on people giving blood. And sometimes there's no blood. There's been times when there's no blood for me in the whole country because I need blood from my ethnic minority. And there's been no blood. So I have to suffer with sickle cell pain until the blood becomes available. So that's the blood transfusion part. It is a gruesome process. It's a very tiring process. It's not just like, oh, we're going to have an exchange transfusion. It is tiring. It's extremely gruesome. So, but I still thank God that it's available. Now, I have been married for 21 years. Thank God for that. And how it's affected my marriage, to be honest, I'm grateful that I have a husband who does not treat me like I have sickle cell. In fact, I think sometimes he forgets that I have sickle cell. So in that respect, I have to thank God for that. But on the other hand, our household, that means that my work is very zero to nothing sometimes, or very menial sometimes. So the burden lies on him to work. Because with sickle cell, especially for me, I could work 1 week, then the 2 weeks I'm down. I could work a month, and in the 6 months I'm down. So sickle cell is not just a diagnosis, it affects your finances. it affects your married life, because sometimes we may plan to do things and honestly, I'm in pain and I can't do anything. So that's how it's affected. On my marriage side, not so much, because I'm blessed. I have a husband who's very understanding, who does not treat me like I've got sickle cell, who's always there when I need him to do anything, really. So in that respect, I'm so grateful to God for. Now, for my children, that's a different story, because every time the ambulance comes and picks me up, and I have gas and air and I'm in pain and my children watch me being taken up, it breaks my heart every single time. It really breaks my heart, because in my mind, I'm like, could this be the episode maybe that takes me out? But because I'm a faith-based person, I always try and say, you know what, Lord, I'm coming back to my kids. I'm coming back to my kids. And on their side, they miss their mom. When I'm in hospital, they miss their mom. I can't read stories to them. I can't take them out. I can't do so many things with them. And even when I come out of an episode, it's not like, oh, now you're well, you have, your crisis is gone. I still have to deal with chronic pain. I'll just explain a little bit about sickle cell and and the pain it has. We have chronic pain as a result of what sickle cell has been doing all these years. And then we have acute crisis pains where the sharp pains come instantly. So I have to deal with chronic pain on a daily basis. Every time I wake up, I always tell my friends and my family, my body doesn't start working until 12 o'clock, because everywhere hurts. I might not be in a sickle cell crisis, but I have chronic pain as a result of sickle cell. So for me particularly, it's my lower back. There's something called dead bone disease, whereby the oxygen does not get to your bones and they die. Some people have it in the hips and they get hip replacement. And lucky for me, I can't get a back replacement. So I have to deal with the pain, back pain, every single day. Every single day I wake up, I have a headache as a result of the stroke I had many, many years ago. Every day I wake up, I'm exhausted because of the medication that I have to take on a daily basis. So as much as I sit and give hope to everyone, as sickle cell is not a death sentence, it's still incredibly hard to deal with. It's incredibly hard to deal with on a daily basis. And I'm grateful that I have family and friends that understand. If I can't come to your birthday, it's not that I don't want to, it's because I really can't. I'm in pain. If there's something that we've planned, even holidays, we've had to cancel holidays because I can't go anywhere with that amount of pain. So that's how on a daily basis, I am affected with chronic pain and then acute episodes on the other hand. But for me, I think, I was also additionally, sickle cell affects your mental health. Sickle cell affects it's not just a diagnosis, it affects every part of your life. It affects your mental health in a way that you have planned to do things with your friends, you can't. You're stuck indoors for 2 weeks, you're stuck indoors, your dreams are on the back burner because you're in pain. So it really does affect your mental health. And studies have shown that people living with sickle cell are very prone to depression because we have chronic pain every single day. Imagine being in pain every day of your life. You're going to get down sometimes. So it really affects your mental health. But I could go on and on and on, but I could write books and books and books, but in a nutshell, that's how it affects me. It affects your money, it affects your relationships, it affects your friendships, it affects school. I did all my school, like in secondary school or wherever, I was on a hospital bed. I did my degrees on a hospital bed. So it affects every part of your life. But having said that, you can overcome it. You can live a normal life. You can choose to say, this is going to get me down, or you can choose to say, I'm going to fight this. And I think that's what I've chosen, to be positive about it, to share my story, to give hope to those people that think that the diagnosis is their life is over. Your life is not over. I have a full life. Like I've said to you, I have a husband who loves me. I have 2 children that love me. I have support around me. And as long as you have the right support, I think you can make it through. And on the blood transfusion, let me go back to the blood donation. Please, 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 people of African heritage, you need to give blood, because there's been times in my life where I'm in so much pain, but the hospital can't do anything because they don't have the blood that matches my type. And that's why I think this is so important. And yeah, so that's in a nutshell, that's all I can say for now, because it's a wide topic. It's a very wide topic, but I hope that I've explained a little bit of how to live with sickle cell. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Macrina. That was just so insightful and full of your struggles, but also living in hope and living and supporting everybody who is in your situation, and saying there is a way, there is a method, and you apply those and you get the benefit. Are there any comments? Because I think the audience is very, very I would say compliant in listening and participating, but they're not responding by asking questions. I just wondered, is it that they've not had breakfast, or is it lunchtime, or I'm not sure. Can I just encourage you to please? Oh, I got Councillor Nigat wants to ask a question. Please do go ahead. Unmute yourself. Can you unmute yourself, or Paul? Can you unmute?
Maybe I can ask as they try to do the technical bits with her for her. Is it all right to come in as they try to fix that? Dr. Joshi, you're muted.
Is there anybody else want to ask a question whilst we sort out the technical issues? No? Can you unmute Councillor Nigat, Paul? Or
Can you hear me?
Maria?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Yes, I'll speak in the meantime as we get Councillor Nigat sorted. Sorry, I couldn't find where the hand is, and I don't want to tamper with it at all. I may lose everything. So, Macrina and everyone else who's spoken before, thank you very much. I'd just like to re-emphasize the importance of us becoming blood donors, as per se. What I wanted to ask Macrina is...
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Councillor Nigat.
Okay, I'm really sorry because I'm not a technology person, and I couldn't find the how to unmute. But I just wanted to say, really thank you to the lady who shared her experience. Really inspiring, and I think this is where we understand deeper, of the actual condition, the impact it has. And I think just listening really gave me more insight. And obviously, having supported families with sickle cell, I could totally understand the struggle. But I think it's really important that these experiences are shared for others who have no engagement with such conditions, especially even more so when we haven't got the awareness and there's limited information, limited knowledge amongst professionals as well as general public in terms of how we can support. So my question was, how do you feel general public or others could support further? Because obviously it's mentioned, it affects every part of your life. How would you actually want and feel better supported, or do you feel you already have that support from whoever you engage with?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think as a community, we really lack understanding of what sickle cell and thalassemia is, because when I go to have my transfusion, I interact with a lot of thalassemia patients as well. So we apart from the pain aspect of it, we share so much, but there's not enough empathy and understanding for the condition, because as with sickle cell, I would say it's an invisible disability. It's such an invisible disability because you can see me today looking good, and then when I call into work tomorrow saying I cannot go to work, they'll be like, but you were looking good yesterday, you had the energy yesterday, what's there now? So I think as a sickle cell society, and I thank God that John is here now, it would benefit workplaces to know that struggles that sickle cell and thalassemia people go through. It's not that, today you're good. It's an unpredictable condition. I could be good for 6 months and down for the whole year. So I think empathy in knowing that, you know what, it might not show, it's an invisible, when she tells me I'm in pain, she really means that she's in pain. I don't have to crawl on the floor to show you tears that I'm in pain. Believe my pain. When we go to hospitals, nurses and doctors, even now in 2025, I experienced it like about 2 weeks ago. Nurses still don't understand that the pain is real. Sometimes they think that you're just putting it on because, after they give you that injection, you're speaking on the phone or you're talking to your family members. But the pain is real. So I would love for more awareness in hospitals, and thank God that we're doing better. The NHS is doing better in treating people with sickle cell with pain, but there's still a lot to do. And I think I would like empathy, even in churches, just to understand that, you know what, this is not a condition that is a complex condition. What you see is not what you get. What you see now is not what you'll get tomorrow. So that empathy to be like, you know what, if this person says they're in pain, then they're in pain. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. It does. Thank you for explaining that.
Thank you very much. There's a question in the chat about how to give blood. I hope that that question will be answered in the presentations that we're going to see and hear. So hopefully that'll be answered, but we'll pick that up anyway. But I thank you once again, Macrina, for that very honest presentation of your condition and how you yourself are managing despite the challenges, but there is more can be done. And you raise a very valid point about professionals and their behaviors and their education and the way they treat patients. So it's there's an all-round job to be done. But I thank you once again for coming and sharing your personal experience of living with sickle cell, and also giving a little bit of insight about thalassemia as well, because those two conditions are similar, but different, and requires equal effort to overcome. So thank you very much for that, Macrina. I'm delighted now to introduce to you our next distinguished speaker, Mr. John James, OBE, holder of the most excellent Order of the British Empire. A very well-deserved honor, sir. Mr. James is Chief Executive Officer of the Sickle Cell Society UK. With decades of leadership in healthcare and advocacy, he has championed the voices of patients and carers across the UK. Today, he will give us an overview of what sickle cell disease is, why it is particularly prevalent in Black communities, and the vital role of the Sickle Cell Society in shaping policy, care, and support. Please welcome, with thunderous round of applause, Mr. John James, OBE. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jossi. That's very, very kind. That's a really, humbling introduction. Also, thank you to Pastor Andrew and our previous speakers, Councillor Nearcat and Miss Macrina. So thank you all for that. I'm going to ask Pastor Andrew or Paul just to whiz through some slides if they've got it. So, and I'll be very quick. I've had the message to be on time, and I will do that. But I also want to pick up some of the points that were made from both Ms. Macrina and Councillor Nearcat. So yeah, if you keep going to the next slide, we'll just go whiz through to slide 3. Next one, because you know who I am. So just very briefly about the Sickle Cell Society. So we've been around for nearly 50 years. It was formed by people who lived with sickle cell anemia, parents who had children with sickle cell, and healthcare professionals. Now, for those of us of a particular age, the 60s and 70s were not that really long ago, but at the time there was a really complete lack of understanding about sickle cell, and Ms. Macrina mentioned that that still exists today. And there was also an inadequacy of treatment for sickle cell, which I'll talk more about today. So the really important point here is that things have improved, but they've not improved in a transformational way for people with sickle cell. So next one, please. So these are mainly the things that the Sickle Cell Society do. We provide advocacy and support. We do a lot around policy and development. So things like the sickle cell standards that doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals use have been developed by the Sickle Cell Society with senior healthcare professionals. We have a helpline and information and advice service, which, although we're a national charity, UK charity, we get calls from the United States, India, Europe, and different parts of the world, Africa, the Caribbean, and so forth. So we're a UK charity, but we get calls and requests for information, not only from people who live with the condition, but healthcare professionals in other parts of the world as well. We run a family retreat where we take 30 children from different parts of the UK to meet one another, learn about their condition. And I'm pleased to say, you know, some of the nurses at Sheffield support that by being there. So we're very grateful for that. We also run a children and young people. So that's what the CYP means, Children and Young People Peer Mentoring Program. And that is being run in Sheffield and has been running, I think, for the last sort of 10 months, 11 months. So that is a service there for children and young people who live with sickle cell. And we campaign. So those are the things that we do. Next one, please. Now, on the give blood point and the points made about the importance of donating blood, first thing to say is why it's important to donate blood is the vast majority, and I'm talking about sort of 97% of all blood donations is from the Caucasian / white population. And therefore, it's important that Black and brown people, mixed race people donate their blood. Why? Because we want to have better ethnically matched blood. Why? And that is because of what Ms. Macrina said in the sense of available blood. So the really important message here is that the more we donate, the more likelihood that there is better ethnically matched blood, and that will avoid antibodies and reactions to blood donations. So I just want to share with the audience here that it was the Sickle Cell Society who campaigned for NHS Blood and Transplant, who are the responsible organisation across the country, to say to them that they should really be working with organisations like us and small grassroots organisations to implement increasing the number of Black and brown donations. So I want the audience to know it was us, the Sickle Cell Society, who got NHS Blood and Transplant to run the programme of increasing Black and brown donors, but doing that through organisations like ourselves or local groups. And that's why we call it Give Blood, Spread Love. We have a programme of encouraging people to donate blood from across the country, and with Pastor Andrew has kindly worked with us. So that's what I really want to say about that. Next one, please. I'm whittling through to keep on time. Dr. Claire Samuelson is on the call, and she gives a really great explanation about what sickle cell is, so I won't steal Dr. Samuelson's thunder, but in very simple terms, it's a red cell inherited blood disorder. It causes blockages in the blood vessels, and that's what brings on the very clear description that Miss Macarena said about pain, both chronic and episodic pain. But the really important point I want to make about this slide, I know Claire will say it much more eloquently than me. The really important point is that sickle cell is not just about pain, whether that's chronic or episodic. It's about health complications. And you heard from Miss Macarena about her stroke at 19, about necrosis of the hip. So you have to have a hip replacement, at an early age. So really important message about sickle cell. It's a multi-organ condition that affects most of your organs alongside the pain. And the final thing to say is that there are well over 500,000 people who are healthy carriers of the sickle cell trait. So they have the gene, but they don't have sickle cell anemia. So so that's all I wanted to say about that. And I know Dr. Sampson will say more as we go on. So thank you for that. Next one, please. And really important to remember that there's not just one type genotype. So most people who have sickle cell sometimes just refer to themselves as SS or SC or SD. There's beta thalassemia in sickle cell. So the really important message about this slide is that there's not one type of sickle cell. There are different genotypes and other rare anemias, but the most common globally and in the UK is hemoglobin SS. So the HB is just short for hemoglobin, but the most common sickle cell, whether I think India has a higher proportion of SCs, but globally SS is the main genotype, but there are others, and it's important to remember that. Next one, please. So these are some of the triggers, and I think, again, Ms. Macarena mentioned some of these, but look, inadequate fluid intake, whether you're a child, an adult, is likely to trigger a crisis. Extremes of cold and heat, viral infections, physical exhaustion, stress and anxiety. Listen, all of us get stressed, all of us get anxious, but that is a factor that can trigger a crisis. And then high altitude. So if you are, traveling, we advise people to, get advice about travel to other parts of the world, because high altitudes, you don't do bungee jumping if you've got sickle cell. So those are just some brief triggers. Next one, please. So globally, it is the most common genetic blood condition in this country and the world. And the numbers have gone up. Dr. Joshi, numbers have gone up and continue to go up. So it's between 18 and 20,000. And there are over 300 babies born in the UK each year. 8 million worldwide. And as Dr. Joshi said in his introduction, if your heritage is from Africa, the Caribbean, Asia, the Middle East, Eastern and Northern Mediterranean, so Cyprus, Turkey, Greece, these are all places that have sickle cell. The last bullet point is a really important message because whilst I've mentioned the heritage, it's important to say that 1 in every 300,000 white UK babies born today is a white baby who has sickle cell anemia or is a carrier of the sickle cell gene. And that is important to say to the audience, because a lot of times people who don't know much about sickle say, well, this only affects Black people, doesn't it? Well, it doesn't only affect Black people. So if you look at the world nationally, or the globe, if you take Eastern and Northern Mediterranean, so the places I've mentioned like Greece and Turkey, Cyprus, these are all places that where sickle cell and indeed thalassemia are prevalent. So it's important to know that this is a condition that affects many ethnicities. Next one, please. So just think about the first slide that I mentioned about lack of understanding about sickle cell and inadequacy of treatment. So that was sort of, the 70s and so forth. Well, in 2025, there are still only 2 licensed treatments for sickle cell. One is hydroxyurea or hydroxycarbamide, which was never ever invented for sickle. But the good news is that it's safe. And it is effective for many people who have sickle cell. It does have side effects, but it is safe and effective. And that's been the standard treatment for over 30 years. And a new treatment called Casgevy was approved in February of this year. It's a gene therapy, and in simple terms, it's a transplant process, which I'm sure Dr. Claire will talk about later. But in very simple terms, if you have a transplant for sickle, you would normally have a stem cell or bone marrow transplant, and you would have to have a matched donor, a sibling donor. With gene therapy, you don't need a sibling donor, and those cells are edited and put back into you. It's not risk-free, it's complex, but the clinical trial data shows that it's 99% effective, but there's no long-term data about it. So those are the only 2 treatments. For Casgevy, it's limited to about 60, 75 patients each year, because the cost of the NHS is 1.6 million per treatment. And of course, there's no long-term data. So there's more data being collected about it. And we've had 2 treatments withdrawn. Crizanlizumab, sorry about these complicated names, crizanlizumab and voxelotor, also known as Oxbryta, both were withdrawn, one in January 2024, because it wasn't as effective as the trial data showed, and one in September 24 for safety reasons because of deaths in sub-Saharan Africa. And of course, that's the treatment landscape for doctors like Dr. Claire and nurses. That's all they have in their portfolio. There isn't anything else. And we've mentioned transfusions, and I've mentioned bone marrow and stem cell transplants. And by the way, just a reminder that it was the Sickle Cell Society with a group of clinicians who got the NHS to fund bone marrow and stem cell transplants for adults. About 6 years ago, the only people who were able to have bone marrow and stem cell transplants were children. And through our campaigning, we got the NHS to fund bone marrow and stem cell transplants for adults. And that's not a very pretty picture of me having doing my bit for blood donation. But there we go. Next one, please.
Sorry, John, just a quick one. How much did you say the treatment was? 1.6 million?
Correct.
Wow.
That's the cost to the NHS for one patient to have this gene therapy transplant. And as I say, I don't want to steal, Dr. Claire's, but it's really it's really groundbreaking. But it's groundbreaking for a small group of patients who are the most severe form of sickle cell. So. And of course, there's no long-term data, although the clinical trial data shows that it's effective, and it's a curative option that is available, like bone marrow and stem cell from a sibling. But I'm sure there'll be more about that later. This slide is simply to just show everybody the point that I made about it being a multi-organ condition. Yes, there's pain. That's chronic pain, that's episodic pain, unpredictable pain, but there's also damage to the organ. And Miss Macrina made the point, which is in the little box, about the psychological and mental health challenges that come with this condition, particularly for children and young people, because they can't do what their peers are doing. So that's all this slide is intended to convey, the complexity of a multi-organ system. Next one, please. And this is about priapism. So priapism is an unwanted erection which young boys and men don't talk about, even to their partners or their siblings. And this was a video that we did, an animation, and I would encourage anybody on the audience who hasn't seen the animation to log on to the website. So it's a really good resource for clinicians, that's doctors and nurses, but it's also a really important resource for parents and young people. Next one, please. Now, going back to the first slide about the lack of awareness, and we've heard from Councillor Niggard, we've heard from Ms. Macrina that, there's still a lack of awareness. The Can You Tell It's Sickle Cell campaign was another campaign that arose from work that we did about 3 or 4 years ago with NHS England from our No One's Listening report. And that was a national campaign to increase awareness of healthcare professionals, particularly those in accident and emergency department, but not exclusively, about sickle cell. So we've been doing what we can as a charity to get NHS England to run programs that upskill health and care professionals, particularly those in A&E, and particularly those on general medicine wards. Why? Because most patients will tell you that when they see their consultant or their specialist nurse with sickle cell or thalassemia or another rare anemia, they get a good level of service. It's when they are on general wards in A&E that the experience is poorer, and where there are a lot of times many shortcomings. So that's the type of work we do. And if you go to the next slide, I'm going to mention something at the end about schools and employers. But in addition to that campaign, there is also something called the Act Now, ACT, Act Now. And the Act Now is also a program of work that is being rolled out in accident and emergency departments. So the acronym stands as it says there: analgesia, compassion, test, trigger, notify, oxygen, watch. So these are part of the campaigns that we have got NHS England to fund and do within the wider NHS. Next one, please. And I'm pleased to say one of the things as an acceptance by NHS England that people's experience of accident and emergency is so poor that they have set up 7 pilots across the country. And I'm very pleased to say, because we're all, Pastor Andrew is leading this from Sheffield today, but one of those emergency bypass units is Leeds and Sheffield, and that aims to allow people with sickle cell to bypass A&E and go direct to a healthcare professional who understands, knows sickle cell and deals with them. And if you go to the next slide, I'm just going to give you a quote. So this is the team in a ED bypass. This one just happens to be in London, so they're one of the 7 pilots. They are now seeing anybody who comes as an emergency or needs treatment. They get their pain relief in about 15 minutes. The standard is 30, but most trusts across the country never ever got anywhere near that. But in this particular trust, they're giving pain release in 15 minutes. So it's quick, effective treatment. It does transform patient experience. It's more accessible. And actually, there are benefits to the hospital because in this trust, they've saved about 250,000 just in the initial pilot period. So, you know, all round good for patients, for healthcare professionals, and the wider NHS. Next one, please. And I just want to just share this with you because it's really important, and I want to sort of pick up something that was said earlier on. When you compare sickle cell, as this sickle cell comparative review that was done by Imperial College, whether it's specialist nursing, whether it's charity funding, whether it's research funding, or people's experience of healthcare quality, this comparative review compared sickle cell with cystic fibrosis that mainly affects a different demographic, but is also smaller than sickle cell by way of numbers, and haemophilia. I always say thank you to those 2 charities for taking part in that work, because, you know, the reality is that on all of those 4 bullet points, sickle cell, the biggest of those 3 conditions, is the least funded in nursing, the least funded in charity terms, the least funded in research terms, and has the worst experience for patients. So the reason for sharing that is that it's part of our work to campaign and change things in the NHS, because we want more people in red cell workforce. So we want more consultants, we want more nurses, and we want more effective and coordinated research funding. And if those things happen, I think it can help improve the experience of patients. So next one, please. And we're probably about there. So these are just simple ways that you can help the Sickle Cell Society to raise awareness. But I wanted to end, so if you go to the very last slide, just to pick up something from what Ms. Macrina said. So back to awareness, we as the Sickle Cell Society have long been producing guides for schools, because there's still a lot of misunderstanding about how you support children in schools. So there is a guide for schools on supporting children who have sickle cell. And a few years ago, we produced a guide for employers, whether you're a big employer or a small employer, because as Miss Macrina says, you know, you could be well on Monday in your job and then you're off for 2 weeks because you've had a crisis. So it's really important that employers understand all of that. And the good news, I'm pleased to say, is NHS England are now planning to fund a much more up-to-date guide for schools and teachers and have that online. But that is all building from the work that we did some years ago. So Dr. Joshi, thank you for, and Pastor Andrew, for allowing me the time to just quickly it's really always a pleasure to raise awareness about sickle cell, answer questions and clarify you know, what we do. And I guess the last thing to say, and it relates to something Councillor Nighat said, it's really important that small grassroots organisations involved in sickle and FAL work together. The more we work together, we're stronger together. And it means that there's more opportunity working together to secure larger funds rather than funders say, well, I'll give them a penny, I'll give them a penny, and not much happens. So thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I've kept to time and haven't encroached too much on Dr. Claire Samuelson's presentation later. So thanks very much.
Thank you very much. I don't know where Dr. Joshi is.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, thank you.
To clear the screen with the presentation so I can see what's happening. Yeah, thank you. Fantastic. We got one hand raised. Macrina wants to ask a question. Is that right, Macrina? You can go ahead and ask a question. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry, it's not so much a question, it's just a testament to what John has said about the progress that's been made regarding A&E. I go to the Royal London and it's one of the pilot things that have been done. I've been there twice where you just go straight to the ward. Your obs are done, there's a doctor there, the nurses are there, they administer your pain relief in about 15 to 30 minutes, to be honest. And this has been a long time coming. It's been a long time coming. So I just want to thank the Sickle Cell Society for all that work they've done, because we benefit from that. Instead of being in A&E for 4 hours, I can go to a place where my pain is managed. I can manage to come back home to my kids, to my family. And that place also, that kind of treatment makes me avoid hospital visits in a, on a much larger scale. So thank you for the Sickle Cell Society for what you're doing. And that's such a great work. I'm so pleased for that.
Thank you, Ms. Macrina. Thank you very much. I think there was a question in the chat, Dr. Joshi, about...
Yes, I was going to ask you to please address it quickly.
Okay, I was going to ask Dr. Claire Samuelson to do that one because I gave it in broad terms. But Claire, is that okay for you to answer who's eligible for the gene therapy?
Of course. Thank you. So at the moment, gene therapy is licensed for adults with sickle cell disorder, SS or S beta thalassemia genotypes, who've not had a bone marrow transplant, who don't have a matched family donor, usually a sibling, and who've had at least 2 admissions to hospital or presentations to hospital with acute complications of sickle cell per year for the previous 2 years. So those criteria are already quite restrictive. And I think we also need to bear in mind that whilst it's an excellent therapeutic option for some people, it is very intensive. It requires strong chemotherapy that comes with risks and side effects, which some people would choose not to go through with. And for people who are particularly older people or people who have organ damage already, those risks are sometimes going to be unacceptably high. So I absolutely agree with the comment that it's fantastic that we have this as an option for some people, but it will only be the right thing for a small minority of people. Down the line, they are looking at whether this can be delivered with non-genotoxic conditioning, meaning not giving that strong chemotherapy, but that's quite a way off being available to people in practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire.
Stella Kitts, please go ahead and ask your question. Is that
Stella, please. Right, okay. Maybe she can't speak.
she's speaking? I think, yeah, okay, Stella, please, we can't hear you. The microphone is up.
All right, speaker. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, thank you. Sorry about that. Yeah, my question was actually, the first question I wanted to ask has already been answered. And that was asked by Maria about, the criteria of getting this new medication, Casgavni or whatever it's called. So thank you so much, Dr. Claire, for answering that. But my question is, once somebody has been given this gene therapy medication, does that then make this person free from the trait, from the SS trait completely, or do they still have the traits in their genes that they can pass on to other people?
Well, it's great that Dr. Samuelson's here. So, Claire, I'm going to ask you to answer it, but I'll just say, from my perspective, you will still have the gene. So you won't have sickle cell anemia anymore, you won't have crisis anymore, but you will still have the gene. Am I right, Claire?
Of course you are. Thank you. So if you have either a bone marrow transplant or gene therapy, it will change the genetic makeup of your blood cells only. So the cells in your bone marrow and the cells in your blood, it won't change the cells in any of the rest of the body. And that includes the cells in the egg or sperm cell, which are passed on to the next generation. So it won't change the inheritance pattern of sickle cell. And that's a really important point to make, actually. So even if someone's had a transplant or gene therapy and they're cured or effectively cured, the questions about inheritance will still apply. And thank you for the question.
Okay. Maria, you have a question?
Yes, so thank you so much for this very insightful information. Sorry, I'm gonna stick to the science a bit. For the gene therapy and the bone marrow transplant, you've said that there's a change in the cells, but not in the genes. So does it mean that this person no longer produces the sickle cells, but has the sickle cell gene? Have they kind of become like a carrier now and not a sickler anymore?
Shall I take that one?
Yes, please.
So with a bone marrow transplant, we're essentially replacing the cells in the bone marrow with the donor cells. So if the donor has a sickle trait, then the recipient essentially becomes someone with sickle trait from the point of view of their blood cells. And so they'll be healthy. And if the donor doesn't have the sickle gene at all, then that person's red blood cells won't be produced by stem cells which have the sickle gene at all. With the gene therapy, it doesn't actually remove the sickle gene from that person's cells. It changes a different area of the DNA to increase the level of fetal hemoglobin. So a different sort of hemoglobin that we all have when we're first born. So that's a healthy hemoglobin. So people have more fetal hemoglobin, less sickle hemoglobin, and that's how it works to treat the sickle cell. But it doesn't change any of the other cells. So I suppose it depends what we mean by saying, does someone have sickle cell? Well, we would hope they won't be making red cells that can sickle, so they won't have the effects of sickle cell, which is great. But all the other cells in their body will still have those genes which cause sickle cell, which is why they can be passed on. I hope I've answered the question. Please let me know though if not.
Well, yes, you've definitely answered it. I was asking whether the body can still make cells that are sickled in shape. So yes, you've definitely answered.
Great, thank you.
Well, Mr. John James OBE, your presentation has seriously awakened the audience with the questions that we've generated. And also, I want to thank you for the work that you do on a local, national, and international level. And you've given not only all the information relating to local and global, but you've given us a true reflection of what your organization does. And I just shudder to think that if you weren't there, what would we do? So please carry on the work that you do, champion our causes, and we wish you well, and we are here to support you. And this is an example of supporting. And also, you can see the benefit that you are giving to the people who have this perilous condition. So thank you very much once again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure, and I can't do it without the staff and volunteers and healthcare professionals like Dr. Samuelson. So it's all part of teamwork. So thank you all very much, and for those great questions. And thank you, Claire, for giving your clinical expertise in answering them as well.
Thank you. Which nicely brings me on to our fifth speaker, and I'll do a quick time check. It's 13:47 now, and I was supposed to be winding up the previous session at 1:25. So I'm running about 10-15 minutes late, and I apologize for that. But the fact that people have given up their time, and we've got international and audience with international speakers, I think it's well worth it. So thank you very much. Our fifth speaker now is a mentor, Mrs. Evelyn Msigwa Harlow. She's a teacher, she's an author, and an advocate of international standing. She serves as a program officer for sickle cell at the Ministry of Health in Kampala, Uganda, and is also a member of the Global Gene Therapy Initiative. A powerful patient advocate, she reminds us the only thing more difficult than hearing you have a disease with no cures is hearing you have a disease with cures available, but not accessible to you. Today, she will address making treatments affordable and accessible, especially for those from less privileged backgrounds. Please welcome Ms. Evelyn Msigwa Harlow. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Wow, Josh, you can continue, and please go on, because the introduction is just amazing. I want to thank you so much for the prestigious introduction, and I want to honor the previous speakers and Dr. Andrew for bringing us together. In the northern part of the country, we are trying to do training to the medical schools about sickle cell. So I can't project using my laptop because we're having challenge with connectivity. When I talk about sickle cell burden and I listen to the case study of the UK, you sometimes don't know how to bring it close to home. So I want to bring it close to home. Africa has the highest burden of the disease when we talk about sickle cell. The low and middle income countries are more burdened with the disease. Yet when we come to talk about the cure and research, we lag behind. Yes, India has perfected a bone marrow transplant using both full match and half match, but the cost is still high, between $50,000 to $80,000. Not everyone can afford the cure. When I listened to the second speaker, the beautiful Mbabazi, talking about the stroke, the effect it has had on her, even though it happened a long time ago, I asked myself, how would it feel for her to wake up and there's no sickle cell anymore? The challenge comes that even when the cure comes and the disease has done a big damage to you, the disease is out, then you start managing every damage the disease left on you for the 20, 30 years, or even 10 years. Part of my work right now under GGTI is to advocate for all the technologies, for all the research. When we talk about CRISPR and gene editing and everything, we want Africa to move at the same speed, as the researchers are doing in the UK and in the US and everywhere else. We are campaigning this not only for sickle cell, but also for HIV, that let the cures come to where the burden is highest. So we are advocating, let there be inclusion, let researchers and scientists from Africa come to the US, to UK, to Canada, to Brazil, and prepare. Let us have partnerships whereby we walk at the same speed. If cures are manufactured and done in Africa, the prices will go lower. Let's look at Uganda. Between 20 to 30,000 babies are born in Uganda a year with sickle cell disease. Without newborn screening, without optimal care, these children die below the age of 5. Look at the case study of Nigeria. Of almost 150,000 babies born a year with sickle cell disease. And all we are talking about is folic acid, malaria prevention, yet not everyone in Africa can even access hydroxyurea. Come back to Uganda. Not 30% of the sickle cell population has access to hydroxyurea. My advocacy today to everyone listening, let's try to see that we lobby. Let our African countries, our leaders, our policymakers think of a cure. Let us have hope. Yes, the price is high, just like the previous speaker identified. The price is still high. But once we have the technologies developed and set up in countries like Uganda, prices will go lower. Advocacy is what brings the prices lower. Let's look at how much the cost of ARVs were in Uganda about 20 years ago. A dose could have been costing almost $500 or $400 a day. With proper advocacy, today, no one is paying a coin for ARVs. I am advocating, let us have actual partnerships so that we can have cures and technologies developed in Africa where the burden is highest. Let us move at the same pace with the researchers in the developed countries. Thank you very much.
I am stunned.
So am I. You're not alone. I'm stunned as well.
Miss Evelyn.
Yes, please.
Keep on talking. You told me to keep on talking, but I want you to keep on talking. Because people are here to listen to you and to gain from your insight and your wisdom and knowledge and expertise. So I heard loud and clear, the cost is a major factor. And I think in healthcare and in social care, there is always a challenge. It's how we mobilize people, especially those who are the bearers of any ailments, to have a voice and a strong voice which reaches the parts that it needs to reach. And it's organizations like John James and the professionals and Pastor Andrew Bukenya can enable that to do. So these kind of events are very powerful and ought to be supported. But thank you very much for that. There is a question from Maria.
So also in that line, as we have people like John, as people have like Andrew and you now at the same level, is when now we can bring in the stakeholders, the governments, and we lobby, we advocate. Because I have seen my son going through bone marrow transplant. I am his stem cell donor, and I know what it feels like to wake up and your son does not have to talk about pain. To wake up and you don't know, to feel that you have been given a new lease to life. Thank you.
Maria, go ahead and ask your question, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Miss Evelyn. Just to shout out, I used to work at the Joint Clinical Research Center myself. It's nice to hear from someone who's actually doing the work. So we've been talking about the treatments, the bone marrow treatment, the gene therapy, the hydroxyurea or urea. I was just curious because speaking from the speakers that have been speaking are from the UK, where this research is happening, where these treatments are more accessible, but it's still expensive, right? So I'm curious, Miss Evelyn, if you have some information about how it is in Uganda. Is there anyone doing this research in regards to sickle cell, or is the expectation completely from the UK and the US who are currently doing the research? Because gene therapy is good, yes, but the expense is quite high. So is there any research happening in Uganda at the moment, or anywhere in Africa in regards to that?
Yes, Maria. We really have a lot of work going on at JCRC. Being that JCRC is part of the Global Gene Therapy Initiative. Global Gene Therapy Initiative is a body that was started in 2020 by Dr. Sisi Chitio and Professor Dr. Jane Fadea, a great researcher in gene therapy. So as we were advocating, at the same time, JCRC has already started sending scientists to the US and to other labs to start learning. Currently, we have a young scientist, Dr. Lois Weiger. She has been in Dr. Jane Fadea's office for the past 2-3 years, and she's developing prototypes. She's trying to see that the science and the technology that they are using, how can we make it cheaper and be produced in Uganda or in Africa? Where you were, actually what she has worked on right now is when you would be harvesting stem cells and prepare them for 2 weeks. She has come up with a new system where the stem cells can be harvested within the day, and within 2-3 days, they are put back into the patient, cutting down on time. So that is what we are advocating for. And GGTI is trying to see that we get the trials done in Uganda and in India. So in Africa, Uganda was chosen, and that is JCRC. And Dr. Vikram, I've forgotten the name of the hospital in India. So 2 centers were selected to see that we start trials in low and middle income countries.
That's awesome. Thank you so much.
Macrina, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Evelyn, so much for that insight. I lived in Uganda until I was 15, so I know exactly what it is not to have pain medication, to be in a crisis until, you know, God has mercy on you and the crisis goes or something, because there's no medication. So I completely understand that. But how realistic is it that Uganda will get these medications or these treatments and get them to people that are poor? Because the Ugandan system that I know is people with money that can access this treatment. It's people even with money that have exchange transfusions. So not every, you know, how realistic is it that we're gonna, yes, the treatments might come, but how realistic is it that people that don't have money will actually get these treatments?
I want to take you back. I want to take you back. When Uganda was hit with the heaviest deadly prevalence of HIV, the entire Africa was hit. When there were no ARVs in Africa, what was the statement the international body was saying? Africans can't read time. They will not be able to use it because there's no power. But the spirit of advocacy was never burned down. Today, as advocates, like I was saying, people who advocated for ARVs never tested them. No, by the time it came, they were gone. But today, the benefits are there. You and I may not eat or test on the benefits of this advocacy for cures today. How about our children? How about the next generation? But the whole point is making sure the price goes lower. A case study in Tanzania today, with the lead advocacy from the president of Tanzania, she has sponsored the first bone marrow transplant in Tanzania, herself, from the government. Professor Julie Makani and the team are going all the way. We support from the government. If we say, okay, few people will access it, yes, but systems change. An advocate can never stop because time is the master of advocacy.
Thank you. Thank you very much for those questions and for Evelyn to giving our presentation. Thank you so much. In the interest of time, it's 14:02 and we're scheduled to finish at 2. I think we're going to run about 25 minutes late, and we have a wonderful speaker to conclude our meeting today. So can I just check that everybody's okay with that? I don't need but I just want you to please plead with you to please stay, because it's important that we've come to this juncture, and we don't want to lose the opportunity to continue the acceleration that we need to promote our cause for sickle cell anemia. So thank you very much, Evelyn, for that fantastic presentation. Our final speaker is absolutely an amazing person, Dr. Claire Samuelson. She's a distinguished clinician and educator. She's a consultant hematologist, training program director, and clinical lead for the Northwest and Yorkshire Hematoglobinopathy Coordinating Center. I need a degree for saying that. Amazing. Serving both Sheffield Teaching Hospitals and Bradford Hospitals. She's also an honorary senior clinical lecturer at the University of Sheffield. Today, she will speak on a vital subject, the role of blood donation from African heritage donors and hopefully Asian as well, and the importance of matching blood types and subtypes and why this is life-saving for patients with sickle cell disease. I would also request her to add maybe a little bit on thalassemia if she can. And please join me in welcoming Dr. Claire Samuelson. We are very fortunate to have her with her today. It is a huge honor. Thank you very much, Dr. Claire Samuelson. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Joshi. Thank you for the very kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to talk today. Can I just check that you can see this slide, the title slide?
I can see.
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Okay, so we'll jump straight in and we'll talk about why we need blood to treat sickle cell. I think, Macrina, you gave us, lots of really relevant background, and thank you for sharing your story. I think that it means more to people when they hear from you about your experience often than it does, hearing from me or other healthcare professionals. I'm very grateful to you for doing that. Sickle cell, already heard a really nice summary, thank you, from John James, caused by abnormally shaped red blood cells. Red blood cells are normally flexible discs that pass very nicely through the blood vessels, but when people have sickle cell, when the red cells are deoxygenated, they form very rigid sickle shapes that get stuck in the blood vessels. That prevents the blood from getting to tissues, organs, areas of the body which need an oxygen supply, which causes sickle crisis. It also causes long-term chronic complications. We think a lot about pain in sickle cell. It's very important that we treat that well, that we treat that better. We also need to remember that almost everywhere in the body has a blood supply, and so can be affected by sickle cell, sometimes very severely. We know that unfortunately life expectancy is still not normal for people living with sickle cell. And Dr. Evelyn highlighted very well that most babies born with sickle cell are born in Africa and sadly don't reach adulthood. Most won't even reach the age of 5. We know that in the UK, most children born with sickle cell will survive to adulthood. But if you look at the bottom graphs, you can see that survival is still far from normal. And on average, people tend to lose about 20 years of life. That impact is most seen in people with HBSS or SB0, what we think of as the more severe types of sickle cell. They're unfortunately the most common types. People with other genotypes such as HBSC, that effect is a little less, but there is still an effect on length of life, unfortunately. Sickle cell is the most common single gene disorder globally. This is not a rare condition. And in this graph, we talk about why most people affected by sickle cell are from an African, Afro-Caribbean family origin, but we also have patients from the Middle East, from South Asia, from the Mediterranean, from South America. So this really is a global disorder. If you look at the top world map, that shows the frequency, the prevalence of the sickle cell gene. The darker red, that means that the more prevalent, the more frequent that sickle gene is in the population. And on the bottom, that world map shows the prevalence and the frequency of malaria. So there was a question in the chat before about where does the sickle gene come from? Since when did we start seeing the sickle gene? And this explains why throughout evolution, the sickle gene has become more prevalent in populations where malaria is a big killer. Because if someone has the sickle gene as a carrier, not the condition itself, but just as a carrier, there is a small amount of protection from the most severe type of malaria. So people who are born with sickle cell trait were more likely historically to survive to the age where they could have children, pass on their genes. So there's an evolutionary pressure, evolutionary drive, propagating the sickle cell genes amongst populations where malaria has been a big problem. In the UK, we know that there are 18,000 plus people affected by sickle cell. Those numbers are going up continuously. So this is not a rare condition even in the UK anymore. Moving on to why we use blood transfusion in sickle cell. And there are 3 categories of scenario where we really need to use blood transfusion. The first is in a sickle cell emergency, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Secondly, would be a regular blood transfusion or exchange transfusion program to prevent future complications. And the third scenario is for people who need surgery. And I'll go into each of these in a bit more detail. So thinking about sickle cell emergencies, there are a number of acute scenarios where we need to use blood very quickly to save a life. The first on the left here talks about when people are more anemic. So we know that people living with sickle cell on average will be quite anemic, but that can get very bad very quickly for a variety of reasons. One reason would be something called splenic sequestration, and that's when the spleen, that's the organ in the top left of the abdomen, swells, it becomes full of blood, and actually most of someone's blood volume can go into the spleen in a short space of time, and that's life-threatening. Moving on to acute chest syndrome, this is the most frequent cause of unexpected death in someone with sickle cell in the UK, and probably much more widely as well. And this is like a sickle crisis in the lungs, so it affects someone's ability to breathe and to oxygenate the body. Macrina, you highlighted really nicely the importance of stroke. If someone has a stroke, and unfortunately stroke is more common for even young children with sickle cell, then very often they need an emergency blood exchange transfusion to help them recover. And finally, if someone's organs are failing, whether that's single organ, multi-organ failure, if someone's very unwell, they will usually need an exchange blood transfusion to take down the level of their sickle cells. And there are two targets when we're transfusing people, and one or the other may be more important. Firstly, we're trying to correct anemia or improve anemia. The second target is we're trying to remove the sickle cells from the circulation and bring down the sickle hemoglobin level. So moving on now to scenarios where we recommend regular blood transfusion, and often it's a regular blood exchange transfusion, exchange just meaning a blood swap. And stroke prevention is one of the most common indications for this. The diagram on the right here is illustrating a scan called a transcranial Doppler scan. It's a type of ultrasound scan which we recommend for children with sickle cell. It's carried out usually every year. It's external, it's not invasive in any way. And the child will have some gel put on the side of the head, then the ultrasound probe on the side of the head, which measures how quickly blood is flowing through the blood vessels inside the brain. And when those blood vessels are getting damaged and narrowed due to sickle cell, the blood has to speed up going through them. And that's a sign that this child is at higher risk of stroke. So for children where we pick up they're at high risk of stroke, we implement regular exchange or top-up transfusions to reduce that child's risk of having a stroke. Unfortunately, some people have already had a stroke, and when that's happened, we recommend lifelong regular transfusion therapy to prevent a subsequent stroke. For people who have tried hydroxycarbamide, or also called hydroxyurea, this is the same medication, but that's not enough to keep them well if they're having frequent painful crises, time in hospital, recurrent chest crises, for example, then we would recommend escalating therapy to something more intensive, which is usually regular transfusions, at least in the first instance. And then a couple of very specific scenarios. There are a number of people in our region who have had or need a kidney transplant because sickle cell can damage the kidneys. For those individuals, we would put them on a regular transfusion program so that as soon as a kidney becomes available, they can safely have that surgery. And after the kidney transplant, we would recommend long-term regular transfusion, if not bone marrow transplant. And finally, women in pregnancy who have sickle cell, we can't use hydroxycarbamide. It's not safe in pregnancy. So blood transfusion is the only treatment that pregnant women can receive. I'll briefly mention transfusion around the time of surgery. The background here comes from a really large US-based study from a number of years ago called the Cooperative Study of Sickle Cell Disease. You can see that they observed over 3,700 patients. And during the study period, there were over 1,000 surgical procedures. 1.1% of patients died within 30 days of surgery. I mean, that's huge in comparison to the general population. Bear in mind, most of these were not major surgeries. They were things like having a gallbladder out. So that's a very high mortality rate. Based on that, there was a scientific study, a randomized controlled trial reported here called Transfusion Alternatives Preoperatively in Sickle Cell Disease, or TAPS study. And in that clinical trial, patients were allocated to either have a transfusion or no transfusion before their surgery. And I've summarized the results below. You can see that without a transfusion, 39% of patients had a complication around the time of surgery, and in 30% of people that was serious. Whereas patients who'd had a transfusion before surgery, only 15% had any sort of complication, and those serious complications, which are the ones, of course, we worry about the most, were reduced down to 3%. So you can see that based on this, it's the right thing to offer blood transfusion wherever we can safely before surgery. So types of transfusion, mentioned briefly, there's a top-up transfusion, which is, hang the bag up, it's like a drip, it goes into the vein. So a simple transfusion, that usually requires between 1 and 3 bags of blood, depending on the size of the individual. For children, it would be less. Or there's an exchange transfusion, and that's more effective at bringing down the sickle cell level. So we tend to recommend that for people who need emergency or ongoing regular transfusions, and on average that needs about 8 to 10 bags of blood for an adult, sometimes more for larger adults. And people sometimes wonder about what an exchange transfusion looks like. This is not our patient, this is from a news website for confidentiality reasons. Of course, we wouldn't show you our patients without consent. But this young man is having an exchange transfusion. So the blood comes out of one tube in one arm, goes into the machine, it takes the sickle cells out, and then healthy blood is put back in its place. And how much blood is needed? Well, for an adult, for an average size adult, needing regular exchange transfusions, and bear in mind, this is usually between about 10 and 20% of people with sickle cell, we need 100 blood donations per year to treat that one individual, to keep them alive and well. For someone having an exchange emergency transfusion, we might need 12 bags of blood to treat them properly. For younger children, the volumes are smaller. Sometimes for the very smallest children, actually one bag of blood might be split between a number of children. So we'll talk about blood groups, and this is why we need more ethnically matched donors. Most people have heard of the ABO blood group system. So, you know, people are at group A, group B, group A, B or O. But the story absolutely doesn't end there. Blood groups are just markers on the surface of cells. They're proteins attached to the surface of our red blood cells that help our body to recognize our own red blood cells. But that also means that our body can recognize someone else's red blood cells with different markers as not being our own. And that can cause them to be destroyed and a transfusion reaction. So I said ABO isn't the only blood system. There are in fact hundreds of different markers that can be on the surface of red blood cells. And here's just a list of a few different blood group systems. So the RH blood system, the MNS blood system, Kell, Lewis, Duffy, and there are many, many more. And the next blood group type we're going to look at in a little bit more detail is the RH, used to be called rhesus blood group type. And we inherit our RH type on 3 different genes, and we get one of those 3 different genes from each of our parents. And on the left, this shows you the different genes that an individual has, and it's D, C, and E, either big letter or small letter. And on the right, the nomenclature that we use just to name that combination of genes. So for D, you can either have a big D, meaning you've got the marker on your red cells, or you can have a little d, meaning there is no marker. C and E are a little bit different because both big C and little c are separate proteins, and you have one or the other. So you can have any combination of big and little D, C, and E, and we inherit those from our parents. And the reason this is so important is that blood groups do vary by ethnic origin, some blood groups more than others. And that's because we inherit them from our parents. So, you know, all of our physical characteristics, how tall we are, you know, our eye color, etc., we'll inherit from our parents, and blood groups are no different. So some blood types are more common in Black people than in white people. Some are more common in Asian people than in white people. So there is always a variety by ethnicity. And I mentioned the RH blood group, and this is really, really important because the majority, or almost half, of Black people in the UK have this blood type, R0 type. But that is very rare in the white population. Unfortunately, only 3% of blood donors in the UK are from a Black origin, and only 3% of regular donors, as you might expect, have this R0 blood type. So we're really short of this R0 blood type. Most of our sickle patients are from a Black family origin, and there's a high proportion of our patients will need R0 blood, but we just don't have enough R0 donors to meet those requirements. And I'll give you another example, and this is the Duffy blood group. It's abbreviated to FY. I don't know why, FY for Duffy, but it is. So this is at the bottom of the table, Duffy. And for Duffy, you've got 2 different genes. You've got A and B. Each of them can be either positive or negative. And this just shows across different ethnicities. You can see this, this Duffy A neg, B neg, or Duffy null genotype and red cell type on the bottom that I want to focus on. You can see that across the table, it's rare in people from Indian or South Asian origin. It's rare in the Caucasian population, but 68% in this study, 68% of people from African origin are Duffy A neg, B neg. It's also quite uncommon in the Chinese and Southeast Asian population. So Duffy A neg, B neg blood, really precious, often much needed by our sickle cell patients. But again, there's just not enough donors who are Duffy A neg, B neg. And these data are from the NHSBT, so NHS Blood and Transplant website, and they look at the number of new registrations and new donations by ethnic origin of donor. And this shows you that the vast majority of donors are of white ethnic origin. The vast majority of new donations come from people of white ethnic origin. And yet, you know, one of the biggest groups of people who need blood are our sickle cell patients, almost all of whom are Black and minority ethnic origin. So there's a real mismatch between the blood supply and the people who need that special blood. And it really matters if we're giving blood that's not appropriately matched. It will always be matched for ABO groups, but for these other blood groups, we can't always match it properly. So let's say we give someone blood that's not matched for the RH or the Duffy blood group. The person receiving that blood, their immune system can recognize those red cells as from someone else. They've got a different marker on that body hasn't met before. The recipient can make antibodies against that blood type. And not only does that make it more and more difficult to find blood units that we can safely give to that person, but they can actually have a transfusion reaction if we give them blood which is not fully matched in future. And unfortunately, that can actually be life-threatening. So I'll give you one example, and I've changed all the details here, so this is not recognisable. This could actually be a number of people. So consider a teenage boy who's got sickle cell HBSS. He had a stroke when he was 3, caused by sickle cell, and it caused some right-sided weakness, but he's made a good recovery to the point where he can now do sport and he's doing really well at school. And this child is now on a regular exchange blood transfusion program, because once someone's had a stroke, we know they're at high risk of having another if we don't give them regular transfusions. Unfortunately, the blood service does often struggle to find enough blood. You know, he's now pretty much fully grown and he needs 10 bags of blood, or should have 10 bags of blood each time he comes every month. But very often they're telling us we just can't find enough units in the country. So this time maybe he's only having 6 units, or even they're delaying his transfusion. So we know that some people are just not getting the treatment that they really should have because the units of blood to properly deliver that care are not available. And in this young man, we've looked for a bone marrow transplant donor, but there are no matched donors, and we know actually that people of ethnic minority are much less likely to have donors out there outside their family who might be a match for them. So can you donate blood? We're talking today about blood transfusion, and usually the answer is yes. Most people, if they're healthy, can donate blood. Now, there are some temporary reasons why people can't donate. For example, if you've traveled to an area with malaria or viral infections. And there are some permanent reasons why people can't donate related to their own health or treatment, or, for example, if someone has had a blood transfusion themselves, they can't donate blood in future. But for the majority of people, we can. For people who have sickle trait, yes, you can donate. Now, occasionally, people who have sickle trait, the red blood cells get stuck in the machine. And if that happens on an individual basis, that individual won't be able to donate blood, but that's unusual. And as a general rule, anyone with sickle trait should be able to donate. You can start donating once you get to 17 years of age, as long as you're at least 50 kilos. And they will accept first-time donors for up to age 65. But if you're a regular donor, you can keep donating beyond 65. There's not a strict cutoff. I thought we could just talk a little bit about the process for anyone who might be interested in giving blood. Sometimes people feel a bit nervous about it, and there's a lot of unknowns. And the first thing I would say is have a look at the blood.co.uk website. It actually shows pictures and videos and talks you through every step of the process. So I'll summarise it here, but do go and have a look at that website. And on that website, you can register to become a blood donor, and you can actually book an appointment. So You can go and just walk into a blood donation centre usually, but you might have a bit of a wait. So it's much more convenient for you to book an appointment and just arrive at that time, and they'll be waiting for you. Secondly, they'll ask you to go through a health questionnaire, and this will be done in private. They'll go through that in detail with you and screen your health. And there are a few reasons for this. The first is to make sure that you're well enough to donate blood, because they won't take a blood donation if it's going to cause a problem for the donor. Secondly, they want to make sure that there's a low risk of any infection being in that blood donation, which could affect the recipient. And thirdly, they want to make sure that the right donor donates to the right person and we get your blood to the person who needs it most. They'll do a finger prick test, so just like a little stab on the side of your finger to get a drop of blood. They put that in a copper sulfate solution. If the drop falls to the bottom quickly, then you've got plenty of hemoglobin, you're not too anemic, and you're fine to go ahead and donate. And they will just ask you to drink 500 mils of water, or they might offer you squash or juice, and they'll often offer you some crisps as well. And that's to do with making sure that your blood pressure is good by the time they start taking a donation, so that you feel well through the process. And some of the questions that they ask you, I've given a little list below. You know, they are quite personal questions about your lifestyle and any medical conditions, but they'll only ask you what's necessary to ensure the safety of the blood supply, as well as your own safety. And the next step is actually giving the blood donation, and this is normally quite quick. It's the process before, which takes a little bit longer. Usually just takes 5 or 10 minutes. You sit back in a nice, comfortable reclining chair. They'll put a blood pressure cuff on your arm and clean the skin. The needle goes into your vein. It's attached to a blood bag, and that blood bag is constantly weighed. So as soon as it's got enough blood in it, it will just automatically stop collecting blood. They'll take the needle out and put some pressure on. There are always healthcare staff there if you needed any attention. And then they ask you to wait for about 15 minutes, have a cup of tea or coffee or a drink of water, have some biscuits. They'll just make sure that you're feeling well before you go out and about. And then, as we've already heard, and Pastor Andrew spoke about at the beginning, you will then have a message telling you where your blood went to. Men can donate every 3 months and women every 4 months, providing they're well and not anemic. So to summarise a few key messages, we know that people with sickle cell disorder often need blood to keep them well, to keep them alive, to treat and to prevent serious complications. It's important that that blood is well matched, otherwise it can actually cause even more problems than it solves. We do not have enough Black and Asian blood donors, which makes getting properly matched blood really difficult sometimes for patients. But being a blood donor is generally safe and straightforward, and a life-saving thing to do. So just a reminder there of the website, blood.co.uk, which has a lot more information about blood donation, and I'd welcome any questions. Thank you.
Wow. Amazing, Dr. Claire Slemison. That was a rapid gallop, a sprint through the presentation. But what a fascinating talk. You must have put hours and hours of time to prepare this talk and to deliver it in such a clear and compact manner is a credit to yourself and your professionalism. I thank you so much. Can I invite any questions and comments about Dr. Claire Slemmison's presentation?
Yes, Dr. Joshi, please.
Go ahead, Dr. Pastor Andrew Bukenya.
I have a question I'm failing to find a way to ask Dr. Samuelson about it, but hopefully when I say it, she'll better understand what I'm trying to say. I'm not subtype, that's my subtype, and I'm so privileged to be that. I'm trying to understand why, when it comes to giving blood to sickle cell disease people who need it, why has it got to be a certain subtype? Yet when it comes to giving, like in an emergency, then the subtype doesn't count. I don't know if it makes medical sense what I'm trying to ask.
It does. It absolutely does. So any blood transfusion given to anyone for any reason should always be matched for the ABO blood group or compatible for ABO blood group. And the reason for that is that if we're group O, for example, we naturally have antibodies in the body against group A and group B markers, even if we've never had a transfusion. And so we always have to match for ABO. Now, for the other blood groups, like the RH group, we don't naturally have those antibodies. So our bodies only start to make a reaction if we have already been exposed to mismatched cells. So there are certain scenarios where we want to be really careful that we don't result in people making those antibodies. And we're thinking about people who need regular blood transfusion or who are likely to need transfusion in the future, because most people never need a transfusion. So for people with sickle cell and people with thalassemia, we know that they're much more likely than the general population to need at least one transfusion and probably multiple transfusions throughout their lives. And for that reason, we want to protect them. And so we say, even for their first blood transfusion, their blood should be matched for not just the ABO blood group, but for the RH blood group, and also for KEL blood group, which is another blood group. So we want to be more careful to prevent those antibodies being formed in the first place. So if someone needs a blood transfusion because maybe they've been in an accident, that probably will only be a one-off event. You know, they're unlikely to need more blood in the future. So even if they do make an antibody to the RH group, that probably won't ever cause them difficulty in the future. And that's why we're not always so careful at matching. The only exception to that is that the RH antibodies and RHD can cause a problem in pregnancy. So for women of childbearing age, if they have any sort of transfusion, we will try and make sure that it's RHD matched or negative for them. So that's another, I suppose, like special group where we try and take additional precautions. But for the general population, where we're not as concerned, if they were to make, you know, an anti-C antibody, for example, in future, well, if they never have another blood transfusion, that will never cause them a problem. So I hope that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And I'll throw two more to you as well. I don't know, from your field of research and expertise, do you have any statistics why the shortage of the much needed blood for sickle cell disease? And the next question is, we've spoken about the cures for sickle cell, but is it possible for you to highlight on how it spreads or transmitted? I don't know the correct word to use, spread or transmitted.
Sickle cell, of course, of course. So in terms of why we don't have enough properly matched blood, we know that only a small minority of blood donors are from Black or other minority ethnic groups. I don't think any of us understand quite why that is, and we know NHSBT are doing a lot of work to encourage a much more representative spread of donors. I don't know why the vast majority of donors are still white. It doesn't represent the differences in our communities, and I think that's really up for discussion. In terms of the spread of sickle cell, so to inherit sickle cell, a baby has to inherit a gene from each of their parents, and one of them will always have to be a sickle cell gene. The other gene can be a sickle cell gene, or it can be a number of other unusual genes like hemoglobin C or beta thalassemia. And when they come together, that baby will be affected by sickle cell. If both the parents are carriers, for example, for sickle cell, there'll be a 1 in 4 chance that each child they have will be affected by sickle cell. People don't always, well, probably they wouldn't know if they're a carrier unless they've actually had a test, because people who are just carriers or sickle cell trait are perfectly healthy. They don't have symptoms. So the only way to find out is actually just to have a quick blood test. So anyone that doesn't know their sickle status, I would recommend getting that test. It's what single blood test. You can get it from your GP. It's free. You have an answer within a day or two. And I think it's very important that people are informed about whether they're a carrier for sickle cell or for thalassemia, ideally before starting a family or thinking about starting a family, so that people then know what their options are and the risks of inheritance.
Thank you. Sorry, I said possibly the last one, but this would possibly be the last one.
Yeah.
So do you, or does the system have a facility whereby people, before they think about setting up a family, are these things highlighted to them? Like, does the NHS take the time to create awareness, to check people, to test people that before you create a family, please try to think about, is that forum there?
Yeah. So it's not ideal. It's not a perfect system at all in the UK. At the moment, all babies are tested at birth to see if they have sickle cell or they're a carrier for sickle cell or other different types of hemoglobin. But of course, not everyone was born in the UK, so people don't necessarily have that information. Even young adults who were born in the UK, they may not know that. Their parents may not have told them. Those results may have been lost. The NHS is considering making a change whereby all 16-year-olds are informed of their newborn testing result. So that would be a start, but that absolutely won't give the right information to everyone. People born outside the UK, people who are a bit older, maybe didn't have that test. And the other thing, really important thing to highlight, is that won't pick up thalassemia carriers. So that newborn test won't tell someone that they're a carrier for alpha or beta thalassemia. So I think we can't rely on that, and it's worth actually having that test. At the moment, it's not offered routinely to everyone, say school age or in their teens. Some countries do that. So some countries have, a national program where they'll test everyone in their teenage years. There's a lot better community awareness and community testing. Some countries have mandatory premarital testing. Cyprus, for example, has a national policy whereby everyone has to be tested for thalassemia carriage before marriage, and that comes with counselling around inheritance. At the moment, there's nothing quite so robust in the UK. I would like to see that improved.
Thank you very
Just
much.
quickly, if I could just quickly add to that. So I absolutely agree entirely with everything Claire has said. The only thing I wanted to add is that the charity sector, so whether that's the Thalassemia Society or the Sickle Cell Society, we do run programs, Pastor Andrew. So for example, every Valentine's Day, we run a program called Do You Know Your Type? And it isn't do you know your type because you like tall people or white people or brown people or mixed race people. It's do you know your genotype? So there's a role for the charity sector in getting more information out there about people knowing their genotype, or if they don't know their genotype, as Dr. Claire said, to go and get a blood test and find out. So those are activities that not the NHS does, but the charity sector does. I just wanted to briefly just add that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, John James. I also like to task you kindly, John James, as well, among your campaigning and the places you go to when you're doing your charities and your good work that you're doing, to also incorporate a system or a type of campaign before people move into marriage or premarital marriage. I know it could be part of a church to do that, but if you find ways as well as communities, like you say, church leaders, most reverends, vicars, pastors, they do premarital counseling. Can we incorporate this as well into that? And as well, Dr. Claire, as a researcher, the system you mentioned from Grace, is it not possible for you to campaign for the UK to incorporate it into their system as well, if it's working? Because if a treatment for one person is 1.6 million, like Mr. John James said, then I don't think it will cost that much to create this awareness.
Yeah, I agree. And I think at the moment, the UK is reliant in terms of a prevention strategy on antenatal screening. So at the moment, the system waits for a pregnancy and then offers testing early in pregnancy with the option to continue or terminate the pregnancy given to that woman couple. Now, That's not a system that works for everyone. We know that dependent on people's ethical, moral and religious backgrounds, sometimes that's not felt to be an acceptable system. And so I'm absolutely in favour of testing being brought earlier, so people are aware of their options before planning a family, whether that's before marriage or at another point. So I agree, and I do advocate for routine screening. I think a system whereby people are tested somewhere between about 14 and 18 years of age, so they're old enough to receive those results themselves and understand them and be counselled about them, would be the best system. So Cyprus, for example, it does institute that premarital testing. Other areas, some areas of Nigeria, churches and mosques will also insist on seeing certificates to prove that both members of a couple are not carriers for sickle cell before marrying them. So across the world, there are a lot of different strategies available. If people are tested before pregnancy, the other advantage of that is there could be the option of pre-implantation genetic testing, which allows a couple to go through an IVF procedure, so a fertility treatment. The embryos can then be tested and a healthy embryo selected to be implanted for pregnancy. So there are all sorts of options that start to become available when people are given the right information and empowered to make decisions about what to do with that. I think we certainly could do things better in the UK.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with that. And that's why we do what we do. And today is an example of raising awareness and having the conversation about those issues, Pastor Andrew. So, of course, there's always more that we can do at a kind of, system level, but just go back to the sort of newborn screening program. I mean, it did take, we're going back to the kind of 80s when that was introduced, and there's still some parts of the world, as we heard from Evelyn, that, newborn screening and screening programs are all patchy. So we just have to keep doing what we're doing as healthcare professionals and charities to not only raise awareness but about the issues that we're talking about, but find ways of campaigning for those improvements.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments or observations?
Yes, I've got 3 questions.
Three questions?
Yes, please. Is this it's not just for Claire, but for maybe John James and other people, other speakers, if that's okay, please? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, so the first question I have is, are there studies about the effectiveness of blood transfusion for people who suffer vaso-occlusive crisis, it's like sickle cell crisis? Is there any academic studies that people could refer me to, or anyone who's studying that, please?
Yes, thanks for the question, Jason. So they have looked at whether or not blood transfusion should be used in the context of someone actually having a painful crisis. Now, if that's a painful crisis that's not involving the chest or the brain or internal organs, transfusion does not actually shorten the duration of that painful crisis. So it's unfortunately not an effective treatment for painful crisis. It should be used in a chest crisis, and that's one of the main indications. But a painful crisis affecting the limbs, for example, it unfortunately doesn't help. Where it comes in, though, is in a preventative role. So if someone is, having the medical treatment, hydroxycarbamide, or if for any reason they can't have it, and if they're still having frequent severe painful crises, then that's an indication that we have to do something else, right? Whatever they're doing, we're doing is not working, it's not good enough, and they need better control of that sickle cell. So in that scenario, there is good evidence that regular transfusion or exchange transfusion would reduce the risk of having more painful crises in the future, and they're more likely to be milder. We would tend to prefer exchange transfusion for a couple of reasons. The first is that it's more effective in controlling the sickle cell level. And the second reason is that if we're just giving more and more top up, kind of simple transfusions, that person's body gets a lot of iron on board, and then the iron itself can start to cause problems and need separate treatment. Whereas if we're doing the exchange transfusion and swapping the blood, that's much less of a problem. Some people do still have standard transfusions, especially if it's difficult kind of getting into the veins for an exchange transfusion. But either of those options would provide usually better control. It's not 100%, but better.
That's great, thank you. The second question is that some people, are asking about cerebellar ataxia, and is there any studies that link, maybe looking at blood transfusion for conditions like that? Also, across cell who apparently saw addition sensitive balance. Is there any studies related to that, please?
I'm so sorry, Jason. It might be my IT, but it cut out and I didn't quite catch that.
Sorry, what I said is the condition, this neurological condition, cerebellar ataxia.
Oh, right.
So I was wondering if there's any studies that are whether blood transfusion could be helpful for that, or other treatments that can help people who maybe have sickle cell who's got that condition as well. Please.
Okay. So I'm so sorry, that's outside my area of expertise, cerebellar ataxia, a neurological condition. I would be very happy to go and have a look for guidelines and evidence, but I don't know enough to comment on that. But I'd be very happy to find, or do my best to find some answers, and I could maybe share them with Pastor Andrew to pass on to you, if that's okay.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for that. And my third question will be, along with gene therapy, I was thinking about like diets, for example, like herbs. Is there any studies about how that can help treat people with sickle cell, along with blood transfusion, like certain diets?
So diet and nutrition, really, really important, and for all of us, but even more important for people with sickle cell whose bodies have increased nutritional needs. And I would refer you for a really detailed answer to some informational videos which are being produced by the expert dietitian, Dr. Claudine Matthews. They're available, publicly available on the website of the North Eastern Yorkshire Coordinating Centre, and I'll pop the address in the chat. And we developed those in collaboration with the Sickle Cell Society. So thank you to John James and his team. Dr. Claudine Matthews runs the Sickle Cell Nutrition Academy. And it's such a broad topic that all I will say is it's hugely important. I wouldn't do it justice if I tried to give you an answer in a minute or two. So I would highly recommend going and having a look at those really detailed informational videos.
Macrina, you have a question. Can you ask your question now?
Yeah,
Thank you, Claire.
I was going to ask Pastor Andrew. Actually, this is probably a suggestion as well. Pastor Andrew and I are part of a big Ugandan community. We have many churches in common. We have many different leaders. But in terms of spreading awareness and testing, I don't think the church, the Ugandan church especially, we are very many of us here, has taken initiative to say, you know what, Macrina is here, come one day to speak about sickle cell, speak about testing. I've been a part of a big group of church, but they don't take it seriously. Maybe as a community, instead of focusing on just the Sickle Cell Society, what it's doing, what the NHS is doing, how about us as a community to also take that initiative and use the resources that are there? I'm a resource. I could write about a book about my condition. Use me, do church meetings where we have awareness and testing and all of these things.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Do you want to respond to that, and Pastor Dr. Andrew?
Maybe in a sentence, because time is going out. Yes, I appreciate and take on board your observation, and we will do the needful. That's why even we have the Uganda Independence Celebration coming up, and we have NHSBT with us. They'll be testing Know Your Type, that kind of thing. But yes, Macrina will work off this after this platform and do the needful to that. Thank you.
Okay, I invite any more questions or observations before we end up closing and concluding this session. I don't see any hands. So I just want to make my observations as co-host and moderator. And I've had nearly 50 years experience of healthcare and social care. And I want to just reflect on a few things that have worked successfully. You remember Clunk Click seatbelt campaign? That saved a lot of lives, safe driving. Anti-smoking campaign, that's done a lot. Fluoridation in water for dental health. And lately, just, in heart disease, smoking, it's the biggest prevention measure that's been successful in heart disease management and prevention, or at least helping. And then lastly, I want to just talk to you about the campaigning and mobilizing support and the role of the third sector, which does at a fraction of a cost. And I'll give you a very concrete example. During COVID, there was very little uptake or not as much uptake in vaccinations among some communities. And in Bradford, where I live, I started the project by engaging the mosques. And suddenly there were queues, long queues for vaccination taking place because the vaccinations were being held at the mosques. And the leaders, the imams had said, I've taken my jab, you take your jab. So there's a lot of mileage in engaging voluntary and charitable organizations to do the work. And lastly, in terms of engagement and mobilizing, what I want to say is therefore, at every church, at every mosque, at every temple, every gurdwara, every place of worship, synagogues, we meet on a weekly, daily basis. If we just had a slot and a campaign for one item to make awareness and consistently give that message for a few months, we will achieve our ambition of awareness and information and changes of behavior that we need. So that's my observations. And now I wish to conclude our session. And I want to start by making a couple of observations about the way this has come about. And it's been a mammoth task to put this session on. And I want to thank everybody who has attended, and I apologize for the extension of the time, but to fit in from 12:30 to 2, 1.5 hours, 6 esteemed, fantastic speakers with a lot of things to contribute, it was likely to fail in keeping the time. So I apologize for that. But I want to thank, apologies is good, but I want to thank for your perseverance. So now in closing, ladies and gentlemen, as we come to the end of the second annual Sickle Cell and Blood Donation Awareness online talk show, I want to pause and reflect on the richness of what we have heard today. From our speakers of distinction, we have gained personal testimonies, professional insights, and powerful advocacy. We have been reminded that sickle cell anemia is not just a medical condition, it is a human reality that touches children, families, and entire communities. We have heard the vision of SCAN in creating spaces like this to raise awareness. Thank you, Dr. Pastor Andrew Bukenya. The importance of community and political leadership in driving change, Councillor Nigat Basharat. The daily challenges and resilience of those living with sickle cell, Macrina Mbabazi. The national role of organizations like Sickle Cell Society, John James OBE. The call for equitable access to New Testaments, Evelyn Mezingwa, and the urgent need for blood donations, particularly from African, Caribbean, and Asian heritage communities by Dr. Kerr Samuelson. 3 things must stay with us as we live today. Awareness is power. By talking openly about sickle cell disease and thalassemia, we break the silence, remove the stigma, and build understanding. Action saves lives. Every blood donation, every act of advocacy, every step to improve services makes a difference. Equity is essential. No patient should be denied treatment because of where they were born, the color of their skin, or their economic status. The statistics are sobering, but they are not the end of the story. Together, through awareness, advocacy, research, and above all, community action, we can write a different future for those living with sickle cell disease. So I end with a clear call to action. If you are eligible, please donate blood. You could save a life. If you are a policymaker or healthcare professional, listen to these voices and close the gaps in care and support. If you are a part of a faith group, community organization, or charity, spread the word and mobilize your networks. On behalf of SCAN, Pastor Dr. Andrew Bukenya for his vision, I want to thank each of our distinguished speakers, every participant, and all of you who joined us online from across the world. Let us go forward, committed, inspired, and united, because the fight against sickle cell disease and thalassemia is a fight we can only win together. I thank you, and I look forward to seeing you all again at our 3rd annual gathering. And before I end, I want to just thank our technical team, because without the technical team of Paul Mukisa, Mr. Gerald Kensigia, Maria Nekyanja, I would not have been able to conduct this fantastic meeting. So thank you very much to all our technical team. And lastly, I want to request Dr. Claire Samuelson and John James and anybody who gave PowerPoint presentations, would they please share them if they're possibly able to share them, because then we can cascade them to other people and they can learn from it and refresh their memories. Once again, I thank you for your participation, for the time that you've given, and may all who suffer in silence no longer do so. May there be health, may there be peace, may there be unity, may there be love, may there be harmony all over the place, all over the world, wherever we live, wherever we choose to live. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a blessed afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are. Thank you, Dr. Joshi. Right, bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor
Thank
Andrew.
you. Bye.